It is now my pleasure to go ahead and turn the conversation over to Nancy Marshall-Genzer, who is an amazing senior reporter at Marketplace and covers several economic issues, has long covered the Fed, and we are so thrilled to be able to have her today for this enlightening conversation. So with that, Nancy, it is my pleasure to turn the conversation over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Rhett. And I would like to introduce John Williams, who just popped on. Hello, John. He is, of course, President and CEO of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, also Nancy LeaMond. And Nancy is Executive Vice President and Chief Advocacy and Engagement Officer for AARP. And I'm going to break our conversation into three different topics. So the first topic is going to be the state of small businesses post-COVID-19, and also the Federal Reserve's response. So John, the first question is actually for you. Why is the Federal Reserve interested in small businesses and their fate?
Well, I think it's because of small businesses are a big part of the economy, and obviously the Federal Reserve, we have responsibility for a couple of important goals. One is maximum employment and price stability. And when you think about a really economy that's achieving this maximum employment goal, you're thinking about an economy that's really reaching its potential. And small businesses are a big part of job creators, big part of the economy, and so it's critical for us to understand what's happening among small, and I would say medium and larger businesses as well, and understand how the economy looks going forward, and how our policies and actions are helping achieve this goal of maximum employment. So that's, I think, the big picture reason we're very focused on that.
Yeah, we're going to dive deeper into that a little bit later, John. But Nancy, first I want to ask you, why is the AARP interested in small businesses?
Well, and first off, thanks to everyone for sponsoring this today. Nancy, thanks for being here. Well, we get this question a lot because people hear AARP and they immediately think retired. But the fact of the matter is at least a third of AARP's 38 million members are working. And they're working in some cases because they want to stay engaged and connected, and many because they need to earn a living to continue to make ends meet. And in fact, there may be even more than a third of our members who are working. Many people who might say they're retired are going back part-time. The largest growing segment before COVID with Airbnb were women over the age of 55. And so the picture of older people in the workforce is very different, I think, than some we've thought about. The second thing we know is that with America aging and with people having fewer retirement or less retirement savings than years ago, we know that more and more older people are going to be in the workforce. We did focus groups years ago because everybody hated the word retirement. And so after all these focus groups, I joked that we came up with a new name for retirement, and it was called work. And that has, unfortunately for many people, come to be true. Second reason we're interested in it is we want to kind of bust that notion that entrepreneurs are only in their 20s and only in the tech world. The reality is 4 out of 5 small business owners are 45 plus, and they are among the most successful in the entrepreneurial space. They come to it after years of experience. They have many contacts. They've had the benefit of failure and resilience, and they want to bring those skills, including some of the softer skills. So we find that there's a lot of interest in becoming an entrepreneur later in life. And yes, indeed, we joke you don't have to wear blue jeans and a black T-shirt and operate out of a garage in order to do this work. People of all ages. And then the third reason is we really wanted to partner with the New York Fed on this research. Such a respected organization. Claire went through the data. John will talk more about it here. And I think what's important is we've all been engaged in the last months in all this speculation of what effect has COVID had on any number of things. And what we're beginning to see with the Fed research, with some of our conversations, is unpacking that and not just kind of speculating about what all the results have been, but having some real data and real insights. This, of course, will be vital as we move to the post-COVID period and work to rebuild the economy and various systems that we have in place.
Yeah, and we are going to unpack some of the data from the studies that were released in conjunction with this. But first, John, I want to ask you about what actions the Fed has taken to help small businesses survive this pandemic.
Well, I think one of the things that's clear to I think everybody who's on this call is that small businesses, of course, are swept up in the pandemic, being affected directly and indirectly by the health crisis. And this is first and foremost a health crisis is having these effects on the economy. And we can never lose sight of that until we get past the health crisis and broad-based vaccination and through this, the economy can't really get back to full strength. In terms of what the Fed can do, we aren't not health experts or health policy, but we can support the economy. And I think the first and foremost thing was to make sure that credit is flowing in the economy. Back in March of last year, it seems like a long time ago, there was, we were in the middle of a panic and a crisis globally. And the Fed, my colleagues, and we all got together and worked our utmost to make sure that the situation didn't get worse, that financial markets were, continue to function well and credit would be able to flow because we don't want a financial or a panic to add to the challenges that we already had. So we were really very early engaged to basically triage the financial system, making sure it's still operating. And then we turned immediately to making sure that credit is flowing to households and small and medium sized businesses. We did a lot of programs to make sure supporting the PPP program in our liquidity facility that basically was to facilitate the use of that program. We did the Main Street lending program, and we did a lot of efforts, including monetary policy, to help the economy add more jobs and have a strong recovery once the pandemic was under control and we can move forward. I mean, I think the important thing was what did we do immediately, but also what are we doing today and going forward to make sure that we have a full and robust recovery in the economy, which of course will benefit households and small, medium, and other businesses throughout the country.
And Nancy, what has the AARP done to help small businesses? Are there particular programs that you think have worked really well?
Well, we've worked with small businesses for a number of years. Several years ago, Small Business Administration came to us because for all the resources they offered, they were finding it difficult to get to our constituency. And so we built in mechanisms so that they could reach our members. And since then, we've done a steady series of education programs, webinars, and most recently, I think Felicia mentioned it, created a small business resource center, which I know you had the .org for earlier, and have been able to provide those kinds of resources to small business owners. We also try very hard to keep in close touch so that we understand well the climate of the small business community. We are a large advocacy organization working at not only the federal level, but in every state and in many municipalities across the country. And as we and others advocate on important issues like sick leave, like paid leave, like pensions, we think it's really, really important that we take into account the very serious concerns small business owners have as they try to provide benefits, but also have to do it with perhaps a little less running room than some large corporations.
Nancy, do you mind if I add to that?
I do not mind. Jump right in.
So one thing that I think in this partnership that Nancy referred to, one of the things that we also are doing beyond our policy actions is doing this research and data analytics that we share with everybody to really try to understand where the challenges are most acute, which parts of the economy are faring better, and clearly this report is part of that, but it's part of a broader effort to make sure that this information is available, people can use it effectively to address the issues and have the facts. And we are a very nonpartisan, non-political organization, so we're just trying to bring the best information, the most timely information, to help inform the work of our partners and others throughout the country working on these important issues.
And John, I want to stay with you. Of course, one of the things the Fed does is set interest rates, and interest rates have been near zero. You touched on this a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more about how the low interest rates, translate into the real economy? How do they help small businesses, say your local restaurant or your local barbershop?
Well, there are, two ways. And first of all, you go back to this issue that during the pandemic, it's, low interest rates aren't going to reopen restaurants or deal with the coronavirus directly. But as, we're getting hopefully past that, I think our monetary policies help businesses and the economy in a couple of ways. One is clearly lower interest rates make it easier to finance borrowing that businesses and others do. Definitely, we've seen very low and record low mortgage rates, loan rates for businesses and others, and that makes it easier to make those payments or to buy a car or to buy a house, and that adds to jobs in the economy. And again, there's this broader feedback loop of strong financial conditions, a healthy financial system and availability of credit that then gets people both back to work, and then they're back willing and able to go back into restaurants or travel and do other activities that of course directly affect the small businesses. So when we think about this as a very much a positive feedback loop of lower interest rates or strong financial conditions, helping households and businesses spend and borrow as they see fit. And then of course that adds jobs, that then feeds back into a stronger economy and helps the recovery be as strong as possible.
And I'm just seeing on the chat, one entrepreneur was saying lower interest rates mean tons to me. So clearly that is a huge issue. Nancy, as you've been watching how the pandemic is affecting small businesses, what has surprised you? What has stood out to you?
Well, one thing that I've been very struck by, and not just with small businesses, but in the broad portfolio of how people are trying to deal during COVID, is we've kind of always known it intellectually, but you cannot thrive in America right now if you are not able to work on computers and apps. And I have been very struck by that in my day job work right now, which is in trying to provide information on how you get a vaccine in this country. And almost every system is built to be online. Very few 1-800 numbers, very few mobile vans for people caught in their homes. And I was struck, and so I've been struck by it across a number of areas, and especially in the interviews we did with entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneurs who seemed, it really struck me, to have struggled the most were those who said they were not as technology proficient at the beginning of COVID as they could have been, should have been, and that they needed to develop those skills and have the resources to develop those skills moving forward. I was reminded right before the pandemic, I had spent a little time with my cousin and his wife, who are entrepreneurs. They have a small business, clothing business in Durham, North Carolina. And they had mentioned to me that they were going to try to open another one down the road in Raleigh. And they hadn't done it. And my cousin said to me, Nancy, we decided instead to do an online store, to have an online presence. And he said to me, that's just like building another store. People don't think of it. They say, oh, we'll have a website. And that really stuck with me as I read through the interviews that we did. And so I think coming out of this, I think for SBA and other organizations, we all need to think a little bit about how we work even more on kind of digital competency, even beyond digital literacy, kind of competency and ability to operate in that space.
Huh. And John, when you think about small businesses coming back from the pandemic, what are some of the challenges you think that they're going to face when they try to reopen or make up money that they've lost?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm optimistic about the overall economy. I do think we're making, great strides on the vaccination programs. We've seen enormous fiscal support from the federal government to households, to businesses, and to state and local government. So I think we have a lot of positives going forward. So this will be over the next year or two will be a great opportunity for small businesses to see customers coming back safely and into their businesses and a strong economic recovery. So I think that is the good foundation for a lot of business owners who've clearly struggled and met with a lot of challenges over the past year and plus now. But so I think that there's a positive going forward. I think, I'm going to go to what Nancy said. She told some stories and I'm hearing exactly the same stories when I talk to small business owners, and really about having to rethink their business models. And I talked to one restaurateur who said in over 30 years their restaurant had never done deliveries or online orders. Now they have to, and that's their new part of their business model. Another startup small business owner talking about exactly, Nancy, as you said, setting up an online presence along with the brick and mortar presence. So I think a lot of small businesses who have kind of been very agile and been able to make those shifts are going to be well positioned in this new hybrid world that we're going to be in, where I think people will be coming back into the city center, into the offices, but maybe a lot more remote work. So I think being able to navigate that will be really important. And I think for those who who's have trouble kind of coming up with a new model, I think that's going to be a little bit more challenging, because I think the new normal, for a lot of people going into work is going to be different. It's hard to know what that looks like. But if you own a restaurant or other things that are around workplaces, I think you're going to need to adjust that. I do see something very positive. You asked Nancy the big surprise, and obviously there's been a lot of challenges and difficulties for small businesses, absolutely, and we've seen that in the work we've done and the reports and the discussions you were having earlier. But we've also seen an enormous number of new small businesses being started. So there is an entrepreneurial spirit. There are people out there who are looking for that next stage in life or next challenge, and we're seeing them taking those opportunities. And again, I think combined with a better economic outlook, I think there are some pretty positive trends there, that the willingness and ability of people to take those risks and start a new business is clearly as alive today as it ever was.
Yeah, actually, Nancy, I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the prospects for new small businesses?
I think there are, to John's point, I think many more older folks are going to look to the opportunity for small business. Some of that is, we've all had a chance to have the world disrupted and think about what we might want to do. And so there's an element of that. And then the reality is, we know that at the height of the pandemic, unemployment for people over the age of 55 was around 11%. And that compares to the Great Recession a few years ago of 7.6%. And so we also know that if you're older and you lose your job, it typically takes a lot longer for you to get a job than someone else. So we know there are a lot of older folks who've been out of the labor market for a while. They are probably thinking about what to do if they can't get back into their industry or their job, and that this is going to be a real opportunity for them. And I think for all of us who do programs, and people in the chat were nice to mention a couple of AARP programs they've been to, we've done partnerships with local NAACPs, with economic development authorities, and I think there'll be even more demand for those moving forward. And we and others will need to rise to the occasion because there is no doubt that getting back into previous jobs for a host of reasons may be very tough.
Yeah, and actually the next thing I want to talk about is the personal financial toll on small business owners from the pandemic. We know that a majority of small business owners didn't draw a salary last year, and a near majority of owners across all races and ethnicities reported they had to dip into their personal money to keep their businesses going. So John, considering that, what do you think are some solutions or tools the Fed could use to help give these small businesses a bridge to the other side of the pandemic?
Well, I'm going to start, I'm not deflecting, but I do think that it's not just about the Fed and it's not just about any one group. It's really about all the different pieces coming together. So I think the federal fiscal support, along with programs by state and local governments around the country, are really critically important. For a lot of small businesses, what they need are grants to bridge them through this period. So I know that some people commented on this. I can't read all the chats, there's so many, but that taking on greater debt right now is not really what they need. They really need to fill the missing revenues that they've lost due to the pandemic. And PPP and other programs were designed really to do more of that. While the Fed, we can't do that. We can't provide grants or transfers. We can only lend money. So we have a part to play in our roles in terms of making sure that the economy is strong. Because again, I think that from my perspective, a really strong economy will help small businesses and others. The faster we can get back to a strong economy, the better it is for them. And obviously, there's a lot of important work that needs to be done, by all parts of our society and our economy to come together. But I do think that the federal support that's come through over the past year, starting with the CARES Act or even earlier and all the way through today, do provide important bridges for households and for businesses and for the economy. It's still a very, very, it's the most challenging circumstances our economy's faced in our lifetimes, hopefully. And this is, I'm not trying to understate that, but I think that fiscal support is going to be an important part of the bridge to move forward. And again, my focus is on really making sure that as we move forward, that we're setting the stage for a really robust, strong economic full recovery.
And of course, fiscal support being what Congress does, not what the Fed does.
Yes, and just to be clear, we can't tax, we can't spend. That's for the elected officials.
Yeah, absolutely. Nancy, considering what John just said, what programs do you think have been the most effective so far, and what do you think are the most promising to help small businesses?
Well, and one thing I wanted to mention as we look ahead, I wanted to talk about how important I think the Fed research is in shining a light on the disparities as well. The very significant challenges of small business owners who are Black, Asian, Hispanic. And I think that's hugely important as we look ahead at any number of solutions. Well, my sense is I'm not much of a student on the impact of some of the steps that have been taken, because I think we need to kind of take a step back and look at them. But there is no doubt that the direct support has been valuable. Again, coming out of COVID, I think one of the things lots of groups will need to look at is how well are we all equipped in a couple of areas. One is the federal government delivering different kinds of things. So delivering a stimulus check is different than delivering a loan, which requires a lot of paperwork and a lot of process, where I think it was quite uneven. And we don't want to miss the opportunity at the end to go back and think about how these systems need to be improved. Hopefully we'll never have another time like this, but we certainly will have examples of federal grant programs and others. And how can we be sure that we've improved them so that small businesses and others can do better? And we look forward ahead to different kinds of programs that will come out of SBA. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of proposals in the Congress that we and others will we'll need to engage in.
Yeah, can I add to that? Completely agree.
Absolutely.
Nancy's making a really important set of points on that. And I think one of the big lessons, especially early on with PPP, is for a lot of small businesses, especially Black-owned businesses and Hispanic-owned businesses, we saw that they didn't have relationships with banks, and also that applies to a lot of very small businesses more generally. And when you don't have a relationship with a financial institution, then you often put to the end of the queue, or even understanding how to navigate a really complex process, which was rolled out very quickly, was really challenging. And a lot of, and we've heard this directly from business owners, but we also see it in the data that a lot of small businesses weren't able to take advantage of those programs initially. So I think to Nancy's point, thinking to the future of how do you create an ecosystem, an environment where the small businesses are well positioned, that if we do have a situation where, you know, a program like this is implemented, that money is quickly and effectively getting to those that qualify for that. And I think that's an area, whether it's in developing better relationships with financial institutions, or also thinking much more about a new type of program design. I think those are really important lessons from the past year.
Nancy, I want to ask you a little bit about the American Rescue Plan. Of course, that's the most recent pandemic relief bill that President Biden signed into law earlier this month. What do you think the impact of the American Rescue Plan will be on small businesses?
Well, I have to confess, I don't really know an awful lot about some of the provisions. I'll leave that to speakers later in the program. I do think that it is going to offer a lot of individuals immediate relief with the direct stimulus paychecks, whether you're a small business person or other, and that's going to be important. And from our point of view, provides a lot of very important benefits for older Americans. And I think the next package will be quite interesting to watch. If indeed the focus is on infrastructure and is on rebuilding in a literal sense and on broadband, kind of what implications it might have for small businesses. And I am quite sure there'll be kind of heady engagement on that as we move ahead.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, one thing we've done quite a bit of research around how, and other economists have too as well, on how the stimulus checks and the unemployment insurance have been used over the past year, and what you see very clearly is when that funding was available, people went out and spent it, a portion of it, and for lower income households, they spent a significant share of it, and that really goes directly into expenditures into services and stores in the economy. So we saw a direct, not only correlation, I would say causation here, of the stimulus checks and unemployment, extended unemployment benefits going right back into the economy. And when we saw that get cut back late last year, we saw the dip in consumer spending. There were a lot of things happening, but then back in January, I think we saw again more money become available and people were spending that. So even the money that doesn't go directly to businesses, the one that's going to families, they're going and taking that money, they're taking it into their local businesses and buying things and going into the restaurants or whatever, and that does feed right back into the economy. So you really do see a very strong positive flow from those policies in the past, and I expect that to continue going forward.
We shall see. For the last part of our discussion, I want to talk about some research that Felicia Brown was mentioning earlier, and showing just these stark differences in access to credit for businesses owned by people of color. They face more rejection for PPP loans, and overall their ability to get a loan. Financing options, there are private and public financing options available for them, to try to get them to the other side of this recession. But John, I want to ask you, what do you think the long-term impact of these financing disparities will be for these firms and for their households?
Well, I think this is an important issue that we need to make sure that as we think about the economic recovery and economic growth after the pandemic, as you started this conversation, that we make sure that this is truly an equitable recovery, and one of the things we've seen, and it wasn't a surprise, unfortunately, was that the lack of an equitable economy, the fact that there are parts of our communities that don't have access to the same type of access to financial services, to health services, and other parts of our economy, clearly became evident when the pandemic hit, and with the disparate effects in terms of health outcomes and the experiences of minority-owned businesses and everything that we've been talking about. So I think that looking forward, it's a really important goal is to make sure that we have a financial system that is serving all segments of society, that is helping all businesses of all types succeed. And obviously we have an important part in that in the Fed, in that we make sure that the fair lending laws that prohibit discrimination in lending are followed, and the Community Reinvestment Act is followed, and those responsibilities we take very seriously. But more broadly, I think one of the big challenges that we must meet is making sure that as we build this economy for the future, coming out of the pandemic, that it is a more equitable economy, that's one that serves all segments of society.
Nancy, what do you think the long-term effect will be of that inability to get financing for firms run by people of color?
Well, long-term and perhaps short-term is a tremendous economic effect on those individuals. And as we look at people who are 45 and 50 who've had a very rough patch here, we worry a lot. I mean, 50% of people over the age of 65 are living only basically on their Social Security check and maybe a little bit of savings. So we worry that that group is growing as a result of this. But I would also kind of reinforce John's look to the future. I think, I don't know what group brings them together, whether it's the Small Business Administration or some other set of people, the Fed or others. But I do think it's an opportunity to bring together financial institutions and talk about this in a systemic way. I mean, this clearly was not just a failure of one institution down the street from me or you. This was far-reaching, and what steps need to be taken moving ahead. And I think maybe we've just identified Rhett's next program. And because I know there'll be some discussion of it later today, but a real opportunity to make it a more equitable playing field.
John, do you want to add anything to that? You were nodding your head.
Well, I was not in agreement with Nancy, so I think, but I do think this is a place where we at the Fed do play an important role. We are a convener because it's, really when you think about these kind of issues, it's not about just one group or another group or agency doing this. It's about everybody coming together, and we, given our responsibilities and our focus on really having healthy, strong communities and an economy, one of our important activities is to convene, whether it's banks, whether it's businesses, whether it's nonprofits, or everybody bringing together the best thinking, the best ideas, and help tackle these really important issues. So that's our commitment, is to continue to engage in that convening, connecting, and catalyzing the changes that need to happen.
Nancy, I want to go back to you and ask about another disparity. Larger firms were able to get PPP loans more easily. They were able to invest in capital expenditures and recover more quickly from the pandemic. So what are the implications of that on the smaller firms and their ability to survive and stay competitive?
Yeah, we saw that all the time, and we heard that in our interviews. And again, how do we get to a place where small businesses who don't have the resources of larger entities and large departments and staff can get the kind of expertise to be able to move quickly through a loan process and others. And these are all, your questions are very good, and really the agenda for the future. And you know, I think we all are sitting in our respective organizations now, reflecting on what we've learned over the last year, 13 months, and hoping that we will find the right way to not just shine a light on the challenges, but also address them. And you've identified a number of them today. And we have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of commitment across all sectors to make each piece of the world a little better.
Yeah, and John, of course, another thing the Fed does is regulate the nation's biggest banks. I mean, how can the Fed help to promote fair lending and ensure that businesses owned by older people of color have access to credit?
Well, as I agree that we do have a really important role to play in that, in making sure that we are holding the banks that we supervise accountable on the fair lending laws, and more generally on providing investing in the communities that they serve through the Community Reinvestment Act. So those are really important responsibilities, and we're very committed to carrying those out. So but I do think that there is this broader issue that we also need to address, which is a lot of very small businesses, and I understand the reasons why. As you go peeking at the chat, haven't used banks that much, or have meet a lot of different types of challenges. And I think part of the solutions, as Nancy was suggesting, is really getting thinking about either new ideas or bringing people together to address making sure that businesses have access to credit that's appropriate, that and the processes that we have are really serving the businesses and the communities. Because as we learned from the pandemic, is very challenging to get the money out to under the PPP program, but also others, given the way the world was, and a lot of smaller institutions did get left out for a time.
Yeah, we'll have to watch how the American Rescue Plan works and how that gets money out to folks and the effect of that. But we are going to wrap up and send it back to Rhett.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to give a huge thank you first, Nancy Marshall-Genzer, for taking the time to help spotlight what is this critical issue, and both Nancy LeaMond and John Williams for what your institutions are doing. I think, what we heard in the conversation today was small businesses are the backbones of our communities and economy. I think we're all agreed on that. But it sounds like we need to reimagine our thinking and maybe some of our systems and maybe COVID presents an opportunity to do some of that. And I know both of your institutions are committed to that, and we look forward to working with you.